Hi, my name is Rachel Dixon. I'm a massage therapist on Nantucket Island. I've been practicing for about 20 years, over 20 years. And in that time, I've really been specializing in chronic pain, chronic stress, and chronic diseases, but mostly with chronic pain. What has been interesting is in my process of the 20 years working with chronic pain, what ended up, people's issues ended up being helped initially by the massage. And then over time, because of a couple of different changes that people had with how they use their body, even though they enjoyed the massage and the massage was very helpful, what actually ended up helping them more was the correct exercises to correct their posture. And a lot of the issues that had contributed to that was in the last 20 years, people started using devices a lot more and they started sitting a lot more. So I also became a postural alignment therapist through Agoscu University. It's an online program, and I studied a lot with a lot of other professionals. The classes that I'm doing, these next two classes, they're going to be on chronic low back strategies for chronic low back pain, and then chronic upper back tightness. Today's is going to be chronic low back pain strategies. And I'm going to start with if you have acute pain, I'm going to then work into different strategies for different types of chronic low back pain, and then different tools that you can use to go over them, as well as different exercises that might be able to be helpful. And then you guys can answer any questions. I'll answer any questions that you guys might have. But first, I should just say, this class is for informational purposes only. If you guys have any issues that need addressing, please go to a doctor, particularly if you are in acute pain. Chronic back pain can also have a medical component to it. It could be an issue with the kidney. It could be an issue with liver. It could be a type of a cancer. So it's always good to be able to rule out that there isn't a medical component to a back issue. And then it's always good, if you've ruled out the medical stuff, to be able to have a strategy for dealing with your own back pain. So just as a caveat, if you have an issue, this is for informational purposes. It's a very general. In my 20 years of practice, this has helped most people. It's like the most average thing that will help people in the different situations. But every person is also has individual issues. So go to your doctor if there is a real acute issue. Rule out anything medical. If you get a diagnosis from your doctor, it can be helpful to know the why. Some of the difference in how I work is not just to treat the symptoms that you have, even though I don't really treat people, I sort of support people in their wellness, but it's to really come back to what caused this to happen and how can you correct it or keep it from happening. So we want to get you back to neutral baseline, and then we want to give you the strategies to be able to deal with it on a regular basis. So a lot of people will say the words, "I have a bad back." Now, I'm going to encourage you to take a positive spin on that and really recognize that everyone's backs have gotten you through your entire life perfectly well so far. And any issues that you might have most likely can be improved. If you think of anything on a spectrum, you're going to have the worst that you could be right here and the best that you could be right here. And you're always going to be somewhere in the middle. You could always be better.
Today she's going to talk about.
You can always be worse. But what I will say is you're going to be somewhere in that spectrum. And so it's really great to know if this is the worst and you're right here, that you are slowly making steps to be a little bit better. So if you are someone that considers yourself to have a bad back, I will say that it's really, really valuable to have the tools in place to create a healthy back. and to be able to know what to do for yourself, because if you are one of those lucky people, you will be a lot happier and more comfortable if you take care of your back appropriately. So today we're going to be talking about low backs, and the purpose of the low back, which is a normal, should have a bit of a curve right here. So I'm talking about the lumbar area, this area right here. The purpose of the lumbar area is stability. So when I talk about stability, okay, I'm really talking about, there's a famous physical therapist called, well, his last name is Gray, so he's often called Gray. And he talks about the different parts of your body, and if it was mostly meant to be stable, which is sort of a place where it's solid, things are attached to it, it's not meant to move a lot, or mobile, which is really meant to be able to move a lot. And joints, different joints have different purposes. Now, we know that it's stable. In addition to, you would have a stable joint, a mobile joint, a stable joint, a mobile joint, stacked on top of each other. And the low back has large vertebrae. It's really meant for muscle attachments. And it's meant to be stable. So a lot of the low back issues will come from if your joint that is meant to be stable, that low back, becomes mobile. It moves too much. And it will often do that if the joints around it aren't acting properly. You're also supposed to have the right amount of curves in your back. So if you know you have your sacrum, and then the low back is supposed to have the curve right here, which curves in, and then you come up, and then the thoracic curve is supposed to curve this way, and then the neck is supposed to curve in another particular direction. So I think I put in here the different parts of the back have the different purposes, but also in an ideal situation, the back has normal curves. Now, normal is an unusual word because different backs, some backs will be flatter and some backs will be curvier, and they both have issues. You kind of want to be neutral, and you want to be neutral to yourself. And if you're too much in one direction, if you eased your way into a more neutral back, you'll typically be a little bit better. So just so people understand, we're going to start talking about the issues with flat backs in a moment, okay? But just to understand a little bit about acute back pain. So I know I already mentioned that with acute back pain, which is sudden, fast, new, to go to the doctor to make sure that you can rule out that there's not a medical thing. If it doesn't sort of go away and ease up in a couple of days, go to a doctor, make sure that you're not having an issue that is medical, and then there's other things that you can do to address the acute. Most people's issues that are sort of acute, if you weren't just like hit by a car or have some crazy thing, is we spend too much time sitting and sitting inappropriately. We tend to slump over. We're slumped in, you know, sort of flexion issues. So our low back tends to work really hard to sort of keep us upright. I did a whole class called Static Back, and I'm just going to go over a couple of the exercises that I talked to you, because a lot of times people will call me for a massage and they're in acute pain, and they're actually not going to change a whole lot if they got a massage right away. And the reason for that is if your back is in spasm, you're in spasm to protect the area, and your brain is not going to let it go. And if I massaged you and your back released a little bit, you're actually going to make your vertebrae feel unstable again. So you're likely to spasm again. So I really prefer working on people for massage once they've calmed down the area a little bit and took away the stress. Not everyone's stress is due to this flexion-oriented, too much time in the front position, but almost everyone's is, to some extent in today's world. So there is an exercise called, or an E-size, which is really an Egoscue exercise called Static Back. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. And then when you're in static back, which takes a person's body, which is usually in flexion, and I'm going to lie in the ground with my feet up, and gravity is going to work to release my back. So now I'm against the ground and I'm in a stacked position. It's the same position as sitting, but instead of sitting up, I am sitting back where gravity is going to neutralize. It's going to let my low back relax. It's going to get my upper back to release a little bit. And then when you're in that position, to diaphragmatically breathe. Now, when people talk about your core, they're actually, a lot of people think of it as your abdominal muscles. But the reality is this area right here, your whole back, is meant to be stable muscle-wise. And your core is actually an element of 4 things that have to work together. In the front, it's the deep abdominals. In the back, it's the deep back muscles. And then on the bottom, it's the pelvic floor. And the top, it's a diaphragm. And this is like a family, and the family has to get along. And one is the mom, and one is the dad, and then there's the 2 kids. And they all have to work together, and they all have to play together nicely. A very, very common issue is the diaphragm and the back overwork, and the pelvic floor and the abdominals underwork. But the reality is proper breathing will create thoracic stability, or stability into your back. So one of the very best ways of being able to create a stable back is to breathe better. Okay, we all breathe, just like our backs have gotten us through. We all breathe pretty good, but most of us could breathe a little bit better. Now, when I also say that, one of the other good things about working on breathing is it helps to bring us into a less stressed state. And in today's world, who's not a little bit stressed, right? So almost everyone, when they call me in acute pain, I will say, hey, go try static back, try diaphragmatic breathing, and when your back is a little bit out of spasm, let's work on other things. So right now, even though there's a whole YouTube video through the library on the static back and diaphragmatic breathing, I'm going to show you really quick what really isn't going to hurt anyone's back if you have an acute back pain. And so I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you real quick, and then I'm going to get any questions on what we've done so far today. Okay? So with static back, whereas normally in our day we might be doing stuff and we're going to be, stuck over in flexion like this. And as you can see, my lower back is not stacked over my middle back or my upper back. And in the ideal world, we have these different areas, and we kind of want our body to be relatively stacked on top of each other in a square position. So if I spend too much time over like this, say you're sitting at a desk, you're sitting at whatever, and my low back is hurting or my upper back is hurting, it can be really useful to get my back to stack up and then work on the breathing. So I'm going to do this. I've got a chair right here, okay? I'm going to come over onto my back, and hopefully you can see all of me right here. And I'm just going to lie down and relax. My arms are going to be at the side, okay? And I'm just going to relax here for a while. You can either fall asleep, you can daydream, you can watch TV, you can listen to music. Most people with acute back pain will stay here for a little while. It will feel good. Your low back is going to relax into the ground. Your upper back, if you have a lot of curves up there, are going to actually flatten a little bit. This is why this is useful on a harder ground, because of the pressure, the gravitational pressure that's going to even up your back. And then it's going to release a little bit. When you're in this position and you're now stacked, you can work on the diaphragmatic breathing, which is going to work down into your belly. And you're really ideally not just going to breathe into your belly, but breathe out the side, and you will breathe out the back as well. So most people with acute back pain will stack their body up properly, and create more stability by breathing properly this way. Okay. I know there was at least one thing in the chat, so let's check. Oh, you can't see my arms? Okay, so my arms were essentially resting out like this. Today the space that I'm in isn't perfect, but it's what I had. So my arms are just resting out at the side like this. Now, that's with traditional static back. Static back is one position that's going to also help unrotate the pelvis and unrotate the upper body, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in the upper body rotation. So there's lots of other positions we could use in static back, but when I was lying down, I was mostly having my arms out in this position like this, just to rest it. Anyone have any questions about acute back pain and the static back, and or why diaphragmatic breathing might be helpful with acute back pain?
When you're lying down, are you maintaining the natural curve at your lower back, or are you flattening your back onto the ground?
You are relaxing and your back will naturally flatten down. So you're not going to actively try to maintain it or not, okay? As you're lying down, you'll probably feel a little bit of a curve in the low back, and then you're gonna, if you're aware, really aware of your body, you might feel that your back is relaxing down, and then you might feel some pressure over your upper back, just because the gravitational force of your body weight against the ground is going to flatten. You're not really gonna flatten, but you're going to add a little bit of pressure that's going to flatten the upper back a little bit. Most of us have too rounded upper backs, so that's not a bad thing. Even if you have a flat back, it's not going to hurt, but it would be helpful. Now, the fact that my knees are up in a chair-like position is actually going to mean that we probably have less of a curve in your low back than if you were just lying flat on the ground with your legs flat up. Much more likely that you're already going to flatten your back a little bit by putting your knees up like that. Any other questions? One very interesting thing is there's lots of pressure. I just want to throw out here, and I'm not expert at this, but it's a lot of people's issues are so common due to everyone having very similar repetition that we consider that it's a normal thing when it's just a very common dysfunction that we can overcome. One very common dysfunction is that almost all of us have pelvic floor dysfunctions, and that's normal, meaning we have trouble when we cough and pee a little bit, or we are a very good Olympic lifter and we pee a little bit. And I would throw out that that is a very common dysfunction, and stacking the body properly and working to breathe is one of the things that would help with that. That's just a little aside I would throw in. All right, if we don't have any other questions about the acute back pain, let me just check the time. Let's go into a little bit of low back. So a lot of people's issues come from having a little bit too flat a low back. And this is where I said, in an ideal situation, the back has normal curves. So the low back is meant to have a little bit of a curve. If this is the front and this is the back, a little bit of a curve. People might have too much of a curve, and people might have not enough of a curve. But the curves in our body absorb energy. The curves on certain places absorb energy. So the curves in the bottom of the feet, when we're stamping down, and so it's our weight and our gravitational force pushing into the ground, okay? The energy force coming up will, if we have decent arches, they're gonna dissipate out. And then the energy force keeps going. So some of the energy force dissipates from our feet. And if our feet are too flat, then sometimes people end up having more common issues with stress fractures. Can be other things too, but a lot of times stress fractures. And then the energy continues dissipating up and it gets to our low back. And if our low back has a deep curve, some of that energy dissipates out at our low back. If you have a flatter back, the energy tends to be absorbed into the lower back, and people tend to, from this and other reasons, often have more disc issues and some other things. In working towards having an ideally curved back, if you have a very flat back, you might want to slowly encourage more of a curve in your low back. Some people can do this quickly and some people cannot. If you have a history or a diagnosis of something like a lot of disc disease or a type of arthritis called stenosis, which is commonly seen in a very flat back, but it's a narrowing of stuff, okay? Or you have a spondylolisthesis, which is where the vertebrae are a little bit slipped forward. It's an instability, but it's a slipped forward element. You have to go very slowly to be able to increase that curve. So just a little caveat with that. Some people can move really quickly, and some people are going to think of this as a very long-term goal to create stability and slowly add more of a curve into their low back. So flat low backs absorb a lot of energy. So very often when you have this flat back, you're also going to have a posterior pelvis. So when we look at what would be the proper curve in the back, okay, so you can see that I have a curve right here in my back and my pelvis is tilted a little bit this way. I could tuck my pelvis a little bit more like this, and you can see that my back is a little bit flatter. So a lot of people might have this tucked back that is not going to have enough curve. The flip side, when we talk about a lot of curve, is this pelvis really tilts forward, and then you're going to see more of a curve right here. So if you have a flat back, you might have a diagnosis like stenosis, which is a type of arthritis of the narrowing. And the flat backs tend to get irritated more if you move too quickly, which is why you want to sort of move slowly. And then the flat backs also, particularly if you're in pain, you want to be able to get your back stable, and then you want to add side-to-side motion into it. So get your back stable before you add the side-to-side motion. So some exercises that help most people with flat backs, they are listed on your little PDF that we have. Now, this is, oh, I'm realizing I forgot one thing to bring with me, but that is fine. Okay. All right. So there's 3 exercises. I had linked them, but it's not so easy to link them. So I actually have the little link to the exercises that we have. I'm going to show you something called wall drop, then frog pullovers, and then cats and dogs. So cats and dogs you will see in every single one. And the reason that I have cats and dogs for all is because we're looking to get our body in the ideal positioning, and then we're looking to get the back to be able to move properly through all the curves. Theoretically, cats and dogs is going to move our body through all of the curves, which is what we want to do. We don't want to get stuck in any one too much. So I'm going to use this. Okay, so the purpose of wall drop is to lengthen the back line while aligning the body against the wall, because most of us are going to spend too much time in a forward position. Now, I'm going to put my foot up on a slant board type thing. I'm going to be against the wall, which is going to remind me how to stack up. I'm going to feel a stretch into my low back, and I might feel a stretch into my upper back as well, depending on if I have a forward position. And then frog pullovers are great, but they are going to pull a little bit more into your back. So and in frog pullovers, we're going to, the back is going to pull a little bit. So just know that if it was irritating to your back, to not push that one so much. We're not going to push our low back into the ground at all. We want to add a little bit of a natural pull and a natural curve when we work on the frog pullovers. And then when I go over cats and dogs, we are going to just work our body through working both sides, all the flexion and extension into our back. So let me come over to a wall. So normally I have a half foam roller. I'm going to actually, so you guys can see my feet, I've got to lower that a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to come over here, and I forgot the tool that I meant to have, okay? But I'm going to come right here. I'm going to have like either be a slant board or a half foam roller, okay? And I'm going to put my feet up on this, which is going to bring my feet into a position that looks more like this, okay? So my feet are going to be more like this, okay? And I'm going to stand against this, and then I'm going to be up against the wall. And as I'm up against the wall, my feet are up against the wall, my bottom is up against my wall, my upper back is up against the wall, and my head doesn't have to be touching the wall, but my head should be kind of neutral over this thoracic area, okay? You should feel a stretch into your calves at the least, and then you would stand here for a minute or two. And this is a really great way for people, if you spend too much time sitting forward all day, to be reminded of what feeling upright feels like, okay? The next exercise I'm gonna go over right now is frog pullovers. So in the frog pullover, okay, the frog position is that my feet are together, okay? My feet are together like this, okay? I'm going to lie on the ground. My feet are going to be right here. My arms are going to be in a position like this as well. And I'm going to have my feet together. I'm going to lie back, and my legs are going to open up, okay? So I'm just going to lie here. As I lie here, I want to let my low back lift up. I'm not going to actively do it. I'm going to passively let my low back lift up. That is very normal and is what we want to do. This is an exercise to allow our hips to be a little bit more flexible and our low back to lift up. Now, some people, when they have a really, really flat back, might take a roll towel, and they might even put it under their low back. Now, again, do this to an amount that feels okay. And this is really going to encourage the low back to create more of a curve than it even is. So then you would lie here for a minute or two. Now my arms are off to the side, but in almost all of these exercises, at some point there might be other things that you could do that are going to work on other parts of the body than just the low back. So then the cats and dogs, and this is one that I have in all of them. So we're really stacked up where I have my upper body over my arms and my hips over my knees. And I am going to work through flexion and extension. So I'm going to let the pelvis be the driver, and I'm going to go into flexion or extension, sorry. And then I'm going to drive with my eyes first, and then I'm going to sort of move through. So I'm really sort of letting my body go through flexion and extension. And most people will have one spot that they move from. You know, a lot of people are too tight in that upper back, and we really want to allow that upper back to sink. We don't want all the movement to be coming just from one area. We want to move through the entire flexion and extension. So, any questions on flat backs or the exercises that I just went over?
In cat and dog,
Uh-huh.
I noticed that you really pulled your head up a lot, and I'm wondering if that's bending your neck too much.
It can for some people. So, but most of us, so right here at the occiput is meant to be mobile. The rest of this neck below it is meant to be stable. So I don't have a problem with my neck, so I'd have to think about it. I do see people with some exercises where they are asking the, so let me see if I can. So this is the stable neck, and my movement is just coming from my occiput.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if your occiput was jammed, that's right where like the head attaches into the top vertebrae, then that can be uncomfortable and you would ease into that, right? Let me see if I can, but this, okay, is not as healthy.
Yeah.
So now I'm not moving my occiput so much, you know, and most of us, like if we're on our phones and stuff, we go like this. This is, you know, not as healthy a thing, type of a thing.
Too much.
It's
Well,
too much. But also,
I find that since I have a very frozen upper back, I tend to cheat and think I'm really doing a cat and a dog by moving my head so much, when really I'm not moving. I'm moving my head more than I'm moving my upper back.
correct. The upper back tightness one will be really helpful for you. But also, this is where we're supposed to have the correct curves and we're supposed to use the correct part. Sometimes it can be helpful to have an educated person watch you as you go through it, because you feel like you're doing it right. And someone else can be like, oh, you're doing all of your movement and flexion right here and all of your extension right here. And sometimes different things will be helpful. So this is something where you might actually start with say a pelvic tilt, so an Egoscue pelvic tilt, which is going to get you just moving your pelvis in flexion and extension if you're using the neck improperly. But I'll show you in a second what that looks like. And or you might break things into pieces where you're looking to get your upper back to learn how to move properly and learn how to create stability into your neck. Because that's important as well. We want, you know, same as the low back is meant to be stable and we're looking to create things to create stability for that. We want mobility at your occiput with the neck that's stacked properly over a proper thoracic area, and to move properly for all this stuff. But we don't want we will buy space from the wrong area. I didn't really talk about what to do if people have had surgery where vertebrae are fused together, but each of our vertebrae are meant to move a little bit. So now if we have one area that's not moving at all, the vertebrae above it or below it have to move more to make up for the same amount of space that these stabilized vertebrae have. It's not the end of the world if we had to stabilize those vertebrae, but we definitely want to create stability in this area so that we don't injure the vertebrae above or below. It's very, very common to kind of create injuries in these other vertebrae. When it comes to the tight upper back, the next class will be really good for you, but we will end up overusing our neck or overusing our low back to make up for this thoracic area. And besides, when you have a really tight thoracic area, your neck is in a forward position typically. So you would automatically hyperextend the neck very commonly. But next class will be really great for you. But yes, you're supposed to use each of the parts appropriately, and everyone's supposed to have the right amount of curves, which is helpful. And this class is a very general one where everyone will have different specific things that, you know, having them more tailored to you is helpful.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so if not, let's go over, I gotta watch the time here. I have 20 minutes left. The very lordotic or really, really curved low back. So there are other issues when your curves are too big. So your curves tend to match. So if I'm really tilted right here, okay, so I'm going to be more tilted right here, then I'm going to be most likely more tilted in my upper back. Now my head is forward and I'm going to even it out, so I'm going to hyperextend this neck, okay? So some of this will be addressed in our upper back class, because chicken and egg is the issue at the pelvis, where you have too much of an anterior tilt and too much of a curve, or is the issue in the upper back. When I first started learning posture work, they said, oh, it's always coming from the pelvis. Nowadays, they're like, we spend so much time in this forward position, a lot of times the main issue is coming from actually the upper back, and we need to address the upper back, and then much of the rest will kind of calm down and settle. But either way, static back can be helpful for a very curved low back, because we're going to take a little bit. So the static back was that exercise that I started with for the acute back, where you're lying on the ground with your knees up on a chair. And where that's very helpful with this is because the upper back is going to have that pressure against the ground to flatten a little bit, and our lower back is allowed to passively release. So in the static back, our low back, which is achy, gets to passively release, where our upper back gets some active, just gravitational, passive, but almost active work to release a little bit, and our head gets into better alignment. Another exercise that's really helpful for a curvy low back is something called counter stretch. And this also is going to actually be addressing more length in that, the back line, but also our shoulders and upper back, and then again, cats and dogs, because once we get our body, like the little pieces done on our body, we want to put it together and have the whole back work together as a unit. So we've already gone over static back, and we've already gone over cats and dogs, but now I'm going to show you counter stretch. Now I'm going to go against a wall. You can go against a counter, you can go against a bed, but the important part with this one is we want to maintain a bit of a forward tipped pelvis through this. And in this, you're going to feel a stretch on in your back line, which is really like up your calves, up your legs, and into your back a little bit. So let me show you what that looks like. So let's see. Okay, so this is going to be too low for me. So if I was against a wall, all right, so I'm against a wall right here, okay? I've got my hands at about shoulder level. I've got my hands at about shoulder level, okay? I'm gonna keep a little bit of a tilt in this pelvis. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm keeping my neck neutral. This would be extended, this would be flexed. I'm keeping a neutral neck, and I'm gonna stick my butt back, okay? Now I am feeling quite a stretch into my calves right now. Now, if I wanted to go back further, I could tip my pelvis the other way, and now I can go much further back, but that's not what I meant to do. I'm wanting to keep a little bit of a curve into that low back and come back as far as I can go, that I'm feeling that really good stretch, and I'm maintaining extension into my low back, okay? Now, how far down you bring your arms, you want to be able to keep and maintain a little bit of that arch. So this is like what it would look like on a counter, right? So now I'm coming right here, and I'm gonna go back, and this is okay because I came further back. I'm still maintaining that arch into my back, but you can see that this is as far as I can go. I'm actually probably better off doing it against the wall. Any questions on the lordotic, the lower back part? Because the whole next class is going to go over all sorts of strategies for the upper back. All right, if not, let's get into the rotated back. Let me just keep an eye on the time. Okay, so rotated backs, this is what it looks like. Almost all of us have it, because almost all of us move differently left to right. We have repetitive patterns. We have patterns that we do on a regular basis. Let me just do one thing real quick. Okay, sorry. My dog was barking. Okay, so what it looks like a lot of times, okay, is when we're standing, we have one hip a little higher than the other, and we have, or one hip a little higher than the other, one shoulder a little bit higher than the other. And it's mostly actually coming from, instead of everything being stacked squarely, it's most often one shoulder is more forward, one hip is a little bit more forward. And why do you do that? You might be sitting at your desk really regularly. Instead of sitting absolutely square all the time, we are writing and we're a little bit twisted this way. Or we are using our mouse really regularly and we have different things out of place. So almost none of us move our body equally left to right, front to back all the time. Some of these exercises are really great to draw out those rotations that we have in our body. Now, I will add a caveat that adding these rotations into the low back and the hip, which is what I'm going to do, if you had a really unstable, unhappy disc or vertebrae, is not where you want to go. You want to be able to do these exercises to undo these rotations, but if you have a really acute discomfort into your back, I would not add a lot of rotation left to right into the back, okay? This is also going to help address some elements where the hips, if they're not mobile enough, are going to contribute to instability in the low back. And where the scapula, a little bit where the scapula could be contributing to issues in the upper back. But the exercises that I absolutely love that really add a lot of mobility is the upper spinal floor twist, the hip crossover stretch, and then the cats and dogs. Now, this is someone that has more mobility. There are exercises that add a little less movement. With any of the exercises that you do, you want to make sure that you can accomplish them and that you can accomplish them right, not using the wrong muscles or not using the wrong body part to buy space where you don't have it. So this is asking a little bit more of someone. If you had really limited mobility somewhere, we might have to ease back and do something not quite as significant. Rex, please take him for a walk. All right, so I'm going to show you on the ground the upper spinal floor twist and the hip crossover stretch. All right, so with the upper spinal floor twist, I'm going to lie like in a chair pose, okay? And my knees are stacked on top of each other. My hips are stacked on top of each other. I'm in a right angle right here. And I'm gonna do a little work into this hip to make sure that I'm not gonna sink like this, okay? I wanna keep these guys stacked on top of each other, this stacked on top of each other, and just my upper body is going to open up. So now I'm sitting here, my arms are there, my head would normally be resting, and I'm going to open up and allow this arm to totally relax. Now, as you can see, this arm right here is not even quite touching the ground. And that's because I'm tight. Now, if I stay here for a minute, I'm going to slowly open up and feel a little bit more of a stretch. Now, if I let my hips go, I could get down to the ground right away. But I'm not looking for that. I'm looking to activate these muscles, get these guys to stabilize while I work on my upper body to be able to stretch. And once you do that for about a minute, you would come back and you would come to the other side. Most people will have a preference of a side that's easier for you. So now I have the right angles. I'm going to work this right here. I'm going to come here and I'm going to work. And you can see I'm tighter on this side. Now I'm going to look in the direction of my arms. I'm going to keep these guys active. I'm going to get work into my hips, a little bit of a stretch into my back, and definitely a lot of stretch into my upper body. And I'm going to look in this direction. So this is upper spinal floor twist, hip crossover stretch. lying on the ground. I am going to put 1 foot over my knee, okay? My arms are just out to the side. You can have palms down or palms up. And then I'm going to allow this leg, this foot, to come down and reach the ground, okay? My bottom leg is relaxed, okay? This guy's come here. Now I'm gonna use my hip muscles to open up this guy. So now I've got this really opened up, and you can look in the opposite direction if you want. Arms down, arms up, okay? So I'm actively working to open up this hip, okay? But I'm also getting a stretch into my back. And a lot of people would hold this for a minute, and then you're gonna come back, and you're gonna change legs. I'm going to allow this guy to come down. I'm gonna open up this hip right here. As you can see from the side, I have got a stretch into my back. Your back, both hips are not typically on the ground. If they are, you probably don't need this one. If you're able to open up this much and have this butt cheek on the ground as well. And then you would come back to neutral, and then you can reduce rotations with the cats and dogs. Okay. Any questions on the rotations to the body?
Can you just do that last one again?
Which one? The upper.
The one where you put your foot over your knee, and then I was confused as to how you got the other leg, how it ended up on the floor when your final position, how you got there.
Sure. Also, if everyone got the PDF, which was emailed this morning, the links to each of these exercises are listed there. I had linked them onto the thing, but for whatever reason it doesn't open. So each of them are like listed right here that you can see the video where they go through. But let's go over it one more time. So we're going to come right here, okay?
Yep.
My knee goes over. Actually, let's go this way because you'll see this leg more easily. Yep. So really what I'm going to do is I'm allowing this leg to just reach the ground.
Okay. You're not pushing your right hip down in any way, are you?
Pardon?
You're just relaxing. You're not pushing your right hip down, are you?
I'm not pushing my right hip down. I am relaxing, but I'm allowing the movement to happen. I mean, I suppose I'm doing a little bit of work to do it. But I'm not so much pushing this hip down as I'm allowing the movement to happen, this foot to be on the ground, okay? And then I'm asking actively this muscle to go. So I'm passively allowing the movement, and I'm actively asking this leg to external.
Okay, so you are your right leg, you're asking it to fall out, sort of. Your hip to go down.
Is that what you meant?
No, your right hip.
This one I am actively working. Yes.
Okay, so you're actively trying to get that leg to open up more.
Yes. This one, yes. It's like if you were pushing here, and I'm trying to get the movement right here. This is where it would be normally. Yeah. But now I'm actively asking total pressure on this for a whole minute. All right. Like 10 to 20% of my strength, not all of it, but I am actively trying to open up, and you will feel a stretch into this hip.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so we only have like 8 minutes left. I also have on that sheet a list of tools to support healthy feeling backs. Heat, really, so heat and ice, okay? Very controversial at different times. Everyone goes into one or everyone goes into the other. Several things to think about. Heat really helps muscles feel better. And it increases circulation and it increases healing. For the most part, heat has a lot of positive press right now. Ice used to have a lot of now ice is a little controversial. Where the controversy comes in is it slows down the healing process, theoretically. It also asks potentially that you might actually create issues if you have the ice on too long. So I don't really want to say what is safe or not. It depends on the amount of time, etc. But the reality is use ice properly, and ice can still be really helpful if you want to slow down nerve signals, because heat's going to amp things up a little bit. It's going to amp up the healing process. It's going to amp up the nerves. But if your nerve is really pissed off, you kind of want to calm it down, and ice is going to be really helpful for that one. Massagers can be very helpful for different body parts. Okay, so overall though, when you think of a flat back, you want to think about lengthening the back. A flat back, it's like the direct area is really short. The more curvy that your back is, the longer the back is anyway. So flat backs kind of want to lengthen a little bit. We want to create more space, which is why we want to do frog-like things and get our back to have curves. That's going to lengthen our back and release our back a little bit. But different massagers could be really helpful. I'm going to go over a lot of different massagers and ways of using them when we talk about upper backs, because they're very, very helpful with the positive curves of the body versus the negative curves. And the low back is more of a negative curve. But one of my favorite massagers for low back is this Hometic Shiatsu pillow, and it has these two balls, these two rotating balls, and they sort of go on the low back, and it can just be really helpful to massage your low back if your low back needs a little bit of heat and release. It can be really, really nice. These aren't expensive. They're on Amazon. They're like $35 to $50 depending on which year's version they are. People like it so much that they sometimes overuse it, keep it in the same spot, and I've seen them actually like almost rub their skin away. They did it so long. So don't do it that long. Just do it long enough that it's releasing your back and it feels really great. Foam rolling for the low back is really tricky because our backs are less stable, and our backs are meant to be stable in our low back, but we don't have the rib cage around it. So I warn you against, we do not want to do what I'm going to do right now, okay? So if we have, let me make sure I'm in the thing. So if we have the low back, okay, I do not want to put this in my low back and hyperextend my low back like this, okay? We do not have the rib cage surrounding the low back to create stability. We are going to do that for the upper back next week. But what can be really helpful with the foam roller, and this is a soft foam roller, is to be able to sit on it, lie back, open up your chest, allow your low back to relax, allow your upper back to relax, and open up your chest. And this can be very helpful for low back pain. Lots of different tools can as well, but it's very hard to do tools to your low back yourself. As a massage therapist, I often use rock tape, which works with your nervous system to change how your body feels around an area. It's going to release muscles and nerves, or it's going to stimulate muscles and nerves, not what I do when someone's in pain, or it's going to work to posturally support you. Very, very helpful. A lot of people's low backs potentially are also that your brain is not giving a good signal of what's going on. So pain is entirely these signals that your brain has gotten that your brain has to decide what is going on. Initially, pain is meant to get you out of danger. So, you know, when your back goes into spasm, acutely initially, it's putting you in spasm because it needs to protect you. And this is why you kind of need to go slow when you're first in acute pain, because the purpose is there to protect your vertebrae. But once the need for the spasm is gone, we want it to be able to release. Sometimes though, your brain's image of the body is a little bit skewed. It's like part of it is smudged or it's erased a little bit. And if the brain doesn't have a good signal of it, it will fill that area with pain because it doesn't know what to do. So it'll just fill it with pain. There's no reason to have pain in that case, okay? It's not helping you anymore. So sometimes using a tool like rock tape, or this is like a scraping tool that's just going to be able to re-educate the brain to be able to feel the area. I also find that I believe that sometimes why a massage is helpful to people is because it's re-giving signals to the rest of the body as to just a better signal of what's going on in the body, and their brain feels it a little bit better. I also put a little bit about cupping, but again, cupping for the low back is tricky to do for yourself. And it's, again, going to work with the nervous system and a little bit with the fascia to be able to give a better signal to the brain.